We old rock dudes remember a band called the Vapors, and this comes up because I'm suggesting that we scrap the Star-Spangled Banner as the U.S. national anthem and replace it with the Vapors song Turning Japanese. I'm suggesting this because the U.S. right now is starting to look like Japan just before the lost decade, back in the period when the Vapors were recording that. I'm Fred Croft. I'm Chief Investment Officer at RAR Capital Partners, and this is an RAR Capital concept. Back before the lost decade, the Japanese looked like they had it knocked. Everybody was talking about how concepts like the Hagakure and the Book of the Five Rings were going to change the way everyone did business. You had innovative, stylish products like Hello Kitty Stocky. You had swaggering real estate zillionaires, you had colossal banks, you had tech, you had AI and fifth generation technology. A lot of ways it sounds a lot like what we got right now. It was all working great, then it stopped. All of a sudden you had a liquidity crunch. I spent a season right after this going through Los Angeles talking to skyscrapers that were owned by Japanese conglomerates. You'd be able to go through and cut a deal with these guys like Obayashi, who were cash scrapped, so you could sublease the things for 70% of the carry that they owed the banks. In other words, Obayashi was so desperate for the money, they'd pay my clients 30% just to occupy the space. You had situations like Pebble Beach. Japanese bought it for $800 million. Suddenly everybody looked around and it's like, whoa, we don't have $800 million. I guess we better turn around and sell that, even though it's going to be a big loss. And after all of that, things didn't go so hot. They basically spent 10 years where the economy did absolutely nothing. They're called the lost decade because it was a decade worth of things that didn't happen. After that, Shinzo Abe, the guy who was running Japan, came up with this concept. It's a concept we've seen more recently, and not in Japan either. It's called Big Government as a Savior. Abe's big solution was going to be negative interest rates. It's going to be huge social spending. It's going to be lower taxes, higher debt. Again, this sounds a lot like stuff we've seen a lot more recently locally. Now, how'd that work? Answer is not so great. But there are some things that actually happened in Japan that worked out. With that in mind, let's see what happened after the lost decade. Let's take a look at the Nikkei for a minute. All that monster banks and real estate stuff crashed. What didn't crash is three areas. One of which is the cloud. Right now there's a number of hot stocks on the Nikkei. One of them is a hot cloud stock called Hado Links. And for those of you who don't speak Japanese, that translates as Hot Links. Another one called GMO Cloud. Translates as GMO Cloud. Enterprise Tech's another big area that's working over there. They got a thing called Chatwork. It's kind of like a Japanese Slack. Another one called Medley, which does HR and kind of back office functions. And back along with the Vapors, healthcare was screwed up in Japan, it was screwed up in America, and it's still screwed up in both of them. But healthcare stocks are not screwed up. They're fairly profitable. Japan has a thing called Sophia, which is a pharmacy developer. It's got one called Oncotherapy Science, which develops cancer solutions. So we can think about things, if we're really turning Japanese, we can kind of take a look at all of that and go, what would work in the United States soft markets? One of the things that works, that we see from Japan, is the concept of kaiju. Really, really big stuff. Godzilla. When we look at the U.S. stock market, there are some fairly attractive Godzilla-type players. Under cloud, the Godzilla of all Godzillas is probably Amazon, and even though it's kind of boring and it's as well known and established as Godzilla, it's something to look at because they've got Amazon Web Services. And if you're in a world where people are working at home and getting stuff sent to home and basically never going out, Amazon's going to continue being in a good place. It'll be boring, but it'll be profitable. Other stock that we see here is even more boring, but it's a real survivor, which is Cisco. They do a lot of internet backbone stuff. It's not going away. They're really well run. It's a playa. On enterprise tech, there's another Rodan-sized opportunity. It's another established deal. It's going to keep being established. It's Microsoft. And the reason it's interesting is not because of all the old stuff you think about with Microsoft, Cortana and all that stuff, but because of their business applications, which really help on work at home. They've got stuff like Teams, they've got Azure, they've got PowerSuite. This puts them in a good position to profit. Now healthcare is screwed up. It's probably always going to be screwed up, but there are some companies that work. We're suggesting that one of those is Humana. It's again got a strong management group. They do good work on analytics, which is going to be important in figuring out whatever the hell happens with healthcare in the United States. And they've got good Medicare programs. We think that even though America could be entering into a lost decade, that doesn't mean your wallet's entering into a lost decade. You can still invest and make money. I'm Fred Croft, reminding you to stay skeptical, stay smart, and stay tuned.